Okay, everybody, could we take our seats, please, and we'll get started here. Okay, welcome everybody to the April 9th meeting of the Pelican Bay Services Division Board. We'll get started, as usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Move the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks as usual to the Foundation for allowing us to use their facilities for the meeting today. I see a couple of board members from the Foundation here. Thank you for attending, and Tony, appreciate it. Okay, we'll start with the roll call. I believe all board members are here, except for Nip Fabregas and Greg Stone. And we have with us two new board members today, Cindy Polk and Bob Lufkin. So welcome both. So let's move on to the agenda. Need a motion to approve the agenda as drafted.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes of March 12th, I believe. Thank you. Second? Thank you. Discussion on the minutes. Anybody? Changes, comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, Bob, as usual. Making sense of our somewhat discordant conversations. Okay, audience comments. This part of the meeting we open up for any member of the audience to address the board on any issue not covered, that's not to be covered later in the agenda. So has anybody got anything they'd like to ask us at this point? Okay, I'll close the audience comment section. Okay, we get to the point in the meeting this time every year where we need to elect a chairman and a vice chairman. And as usual, I will turn over the meeting to Neil to handle this.
Yes, as was our practice last year, and your ordinance that was amended a number of years ago obligates us to elect those two officers every year just for purposes of chairing the meetings and making the necessary committee assignments for those standing or ad hoc committees that we have. And so let's begin as we did in the past with the chair. I'll open the floor for nominations for the position of chairman. Cindy, I'll start with you. We'll come down the line here.
I would like to nominate Peter Griffith. I think it would be great to have somebody new, a new voice at the board helm here. I think he would offer a lot of dialogue and insight. He's been on the board for, I think, about 10 years. I remember electing him many years ago. So I would like to nominate Pete Griffith as the chair.
Very well. Other nominations, Mr. Rodberg?
Does it require a second?
It will after I get some initial.
I'd like to nominate Michael Johnson-Fogg for another term.
Other nominations for chair? Do I have then a second of the nomination for Mr. Griffith? Is there a second?
Excuse me.
That was a yes or a withdrawal?
No,
okay.
Thought you were looking to figure out.
Is there a second for Mr. Griffith?
I'll second myself.
And is there a second for Mr. Fogg?
Second.
Mr. Weir? And then for those typically, and since we have two, are there comments from the board in support of or any information that you'd like to share before we ask you to vote?
I would like to share some information.
Sorry, I can't
I
hear
would
you.
like to share, I was at the budget meeting last week, and it was my first chance.
Cindy, if I could, you'll
it's a
need to
little back-
activate your microphone if it's
Is
not.
it on?
Yes,
It is now.
Okay, so I attended my first budget meeting last week, and it was my first chance to get acquainted about the budget process. I've been coming to the meetings, but I don't see a lot of dialogue happening in the actual meeting, so I decided to go. And when I began to ask questions, many of you were there, I was treated quite rudely by Mr. Fogg, and he told me that I'm not a member yet and that I shouldn't be allowed to speak. And I commented and it was around public comment time, it was the beginning of the meeting. And I said, well, I'm a member of Pelican Bay, and I have a right to speak and let you know my concerns and share my ideas, and I deserve to be heard. So I learned yesterday from Barbara Shea that I actually was a member of PBSD as of April 1st. I didn't even know that because my kind of beginning experience here, I wasn't really reached out to much more than by the administrative staff. So, Mr. Fogg, you shouldn't have treated me so hostile, and I felt like you've done that to me in previous public comment, and I don't believe that belongs as a decorum of the chair. And many of you were there to witness my experience. And I just needed to share that before we vote on this chair, because I think having a new voice, somebody who's a little bit more inviting to hear viewpoints and discussion would be a valuable thing to this board. So I again reiterate that I think Peter would bring some fresh ideas and an inviting experience.
Thank you. Other comments in support of other candidate? Mr. Rodberg?
Yeah, let me just say that this board has a lot of things that it has to get done. It does a lot of work through the committees, but no one bears a heavier burden or works harder to see that we get our work done than Michael has over the last 4 years. I think maybe even longer than that, but I know I've been on for 4 years, and it hasn't been always easy. The budget itself is a big challenge. We are essentially in the position of having to look short-term and long-term of our fiscal needs. And I know from my first experience on the board, Michael brought a discipline and a rationale to how we spend our money, where we spend our money, and how we raise our money. I don't think, with all due respect to everyone else on the board who also contributes, I don't think anyone has that kind of financial acumen and dedication to seeing that we run this place efficiently, fiscally sound, and we get our job done. And I think he's more than earned another term, because we're in the middle of a lot of things now, and we shouldn't be changing horses in midstream. On the point of the Budget Committee, I'll just say, Cindy, I was there. I think the problem you confronted was that you were off agenda. This was a Budget Committee meeting. I understand you have concerns about other things and Clam Pass and a lot of very important concerns, but Michael was simply trying to keep our Budget Committee meeting focused on the budget.
I would like to explain that I was talking about budget items and how money was allocated, and could we be allocating them to the beaches and the mangroves rather than sitting in a budget not being spent and not creating another assessment for the taxpayers. So I'm a CPA by trade. While I haven't practiced in many years, I do understand financial, I do understand budgets, and I have a right to question how we're allocating the funds, and I think it was a logical question, and I was being stifled.
Let's see if there are further comments in support. Dr. Chickrell, I'm just coming down the line here.
I support our current chairman. Over the years that I've been on the board, I've witnessed various chairmen, and Michael Fogg has been very even-handed, very fair, very patient, and has made the board a better place. His expertise is with finance, and he has been able to demonstrate a sensitivity to it, and has helped the board project a serious nature to the community, and I think will do an excellent job in the future, as he has in the past. So I would support him.
Mr. Griffith, you're next. Yeah, please. Check that mic too, if you would, for me.
Can you all hear me?
I'm not sure it's on.
I think it's on.
Can you all hear me now?
We can now.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess, although we have a wonderful audience here today, I'm directing my comments to the members of the PBSD board. So if you'll bear with me. Members of PBSD, where are we? Well, here in Pelican Bay, we are going into a very tough time. There's two major things threatening us, our weather and our finances. Both are changing, not for the better. And the problem is that it's unknown, and there's nothing worse than having to plan and go into a period of uncertainty. So how do we do that? I'm a believer in the democratic board process that we have here in PBSD. It works, if allowed to let it work. But I also believe that we as a board have become complacent. The symptoms of this complacency are, first off, we lack discussions on issues before the board. We don't talk about them. Secondly, we lack expressions of dissent. Now, I know that there's dissent, but it's not expressed. And this is not healthy. Lastly, we rubber stamp too many issues. We don't talk about them, we rubber stamp them. And that's not good. In order to meet our uncertain future, we need to more fully address issues. We need new voices from both new and old throats. Old throats and new throats. We need new solutions to old problems. So my message to the members of the PBSD board is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Please vote for me as your chairman, and we will make this better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board for the nominations? We'll let Peter be seated. What I'm going to ask you to do then, I will call the question in the order in which the candidates were nominated. I would ask you to keep your hand up long enough so that Barbara can record your vote. We'll be required to vote who was in support of the two candidates under consideration. So keep your hand up just long enough for Barbara to recognize those votes. We'll begin with Mr. Griffith. All in favor of the nomination of Mr. Griffith, if you would, by show of hands, indicate your support.
Aye.
2. Thank you.
Just the board members.
I'm sorry. All in favor of the nomination of Mr. Fogg for the position of chairman, again, by show of hands. Thank you. Mr. Fogg then will remain chairman for the balance of this calendar year. The next office is that of vice chairman. I'll open the floor at this time for nominations for vice chairman. Is there a nomination? Mr. Rodberg?
I think Joe Chickarell has served us well, and I'd like to nominate him for another term as vice chair.
Any further nominations? Is there a second for the nomination of Dr. Chickarell?
Second.
Sorry about that. All right. Then by acclamation, if there are no further nominations. Dr. Chickarell will then serve in the capacity of Vice Chairman, again, for the balance of this calendar year. So thank you for that. And the next item on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, at your discretion is mine. So I'll go ahead and begin with the administrator's report. In front of you today, I've provided you with an email thread that kind of memorialized a recent conversation that I had with the clerk of the circuit court. About 20 years ago, there was an amendment to the PBSD enabling ordinance that was brought about as a result of, at that time, what was a effort on the part of Pelican Bay to explore annexation into the city of Naples many years ago. And as a result of that, there was a certain amount of conflict between the community and the then county manager. And in order to resolve the conflict, the Board of County Commissioners asked the clerk of the circuit court to listen to the grievances from within Pelican Bay and suggest amendments to the enabling ordinance that spells out the powers and duties and responsibilities of this board. One of the things that the clerk at that time, Dwight Brock, offered was that while nominations for this board must be confirmed by the Board of County Commissioners, because you, at the end of the day, are an advisory board to the County Commission, was the election process that we've had. And over time, for the most part, we haven't had many elections, but on those occasions where we had more interested candidates than positions, the clerk has conducted a written ballot by mail election process. The current clerk, Crystal Kinzel, has expressed to me that she does not desire moving forward to be the entity responsible to conduct the election itself. And she let me know in advance that she didn't feel that the supervisor of elections wanted to get involved in small-scale mail ballot, signature verified election processes as part of her responsibilities. And so I told her that we had an upcoming board meeting, that I would at least start a conversation today to begin that process. It is my understanding that the foundation outsources their election process to a third-party vendor or provider. And so that may be something. I see that that Tony is here today, and I'm looking for him just to acknowledge that you outsource your election process.
Yes, we do.
So at some point I thought, let's at least have a conversation today amongst the board. I will need to report the clerk's desires to the county commission because at a minimum we're going to need an amendment to the ordinance to designate someone other than the clerk to actually conduct the election process that is there. So that is a result of a conversation that she reached out to me probably about a month ago now, and in turn I acknowledged that, and that's why I shared with you the email that's there. So any input that or observations that board members would like to offer as an introductory to this issue, because at some point I'll need to advise the county manager and in turn the county commission that we're going to need some sort of corrective amendment to the ordinance that is there now.
Now, I'm assuming where this is headed is that the county by ordinance amendment could authorize the board to conduct its own elections?
Yeah, to my knowledge, in response to that, the county commission may have over 50 advisory boards, committees, or authorities, and this is the only one that has an election process. Other people would otherwise contact the board's liaison, fill out an application, provide biographical information, and then the commissioners deliberate and go through a process to make nominations similar to what we just did for appointments. But so this is a little bit of a hybrid deal. To my knowledge, this is the only advisory board in the county that has a pre-requirement for an election.
Are the other advisory boards a taxing body like we are?
Yes. Good question. The most recognizable of those, probably the Bayshore taxing district. Their taxing districts in Immokalee, Golden Gate City, There are drainage districts in the north part of the county, so there are what are called MST or MSTBUs, Municipal Service Taxing and/or Benefit Units, and it's a mechanism that the county has.
So Neil, we would fund, if we had an independent agency, we would fund it from our taxes?
Yes. And historically, we have reimbursed the clerk for out-of-pocket expenses and the labor necessary to conduct the election, whether it was special sequential ballot printing and mailing, and then staff time to compile and count and certify the election that way. So we have historically paid for our own election.
The foundation uses an out-of-town agency to do their ballots? Is there any reason we didn't find someone locally to do it, or? Okay.
Tony, as just a rough idea, could you share with us the approximate cost of that vendor?
Yeah, if you want to just address the board, could you just come to the podium and state your name and residence?
Hi, my name is Rich Alexander. I'm on the board here. 2 years ago, I chaired the elections committee at the foundation, and we produced an RFP and went out and did a competitive bid, and we chose a company called Vote Now. Tony and I were very happy with it. Tony's used them before, but we made the selection before Tony got here. They are very well known. I think they have 100 clients in the state of Florida. They have state-of-the-art software, so I think we would recommend them to you. If any other questions, you can contact me. I'll give you what I know, and
Thank you.
we also have pretty good support from the foundation. Pardon me? It's called Vote Now.
Tony, what's the approximate cost of that, you know?
I will get that for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they were the most qualified and I think the most competitive in price. This is all they do. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments from the board?
I have a comment. I guess I'm,
Michael, I'm sorry. 26,000
Okay,
approximately is what the current year contract.
okay, thank you.
that's for one election? I'm not fully understanding the problem with our current system.
This is outside the scope of what the clerk of the circuit court, and she also functions as the clerk to the Board of County Commissioners and the chief fiscal officer of county government. And so, for example, she is responsible for the county's finance department, to include the Board of County Commissioners. This goes back 100 years or more. And so her core responsibilities are to function as the clerk for official court records and civil records and processes. And then she has an enormous finance and accounting arm and auditing. And I think, without speaking for her, she just feels that, this is outside of her normal responsibilities.
Was she the one who ran the election when Peter was elected? Because I remember voting, he was up for election twice while I lived here.
The previous clerk died in office, and I don't remember the actual date that the clerk died, either in office or upon his resignation. I'm going to say that Crystal has been the clerk for one term and she's in the second term, so I don't know that she previously conducted the election here.
Because I remember we actually had an election that coincided with our board election, and we had like a separate question to vote for, and I just remember doing it, but I didn't remember who. Were they two separate things at that time?
This election has never coincided with another normal election, because the supervisor of elections in those cases is focused on public officials and public elective office. This is kind of a courtesy election, if you will, that was, again, incorporated into the ordinance probably about 20 years ago.
I just have one question further. Would the mailing list for the ballots be identical to the foundation's mailing list?
I would think that the ballot style should be deferred to the consultant if we're going to go through an RFP process. I know that electioneering in today's society is a little more complicated than it used to be, especially if you're requiring signature verification or secure, sequentially numbered ballots that can be cross-referenced in order to prevent ballot harvesting and these types of things. So it's a little more complicated than anything that I have ever done in that regard. And obviously, I'd prefer that the clerk did it or the supervisor of elections did it, but I'm advised that they're not inclined to want to do it this year, either one of them.
Okay, so you'll take that on as a project, Neil, and report back?
Yeah, and just so that you'll know, I'll advise the county manager, who I report to, that, you know, we need to make this a priority. Then we'll do some additional fact-finding, perhaps take a crack at preparing an RFP in conjunction with the procurement department if we're going to go out on the street for proposals. Public comment? Susan?
Just that Vote Now just basically takes care of the ballots and counting those ballots, as I understand it, but the foundation provides the list of eligible voters. And it appears there were some glitches this year in that. So I think part of what you'll want to sort out is that the county will give you an accurate list of voters. You know, they divide it up into commercial and residential so that you get their accurate list each year prior to the election, and then turn that over perhaps to a third party. That's just another piece that I think has to be considered as you move to this new way to do elections.
Right. I assume there's no, just before we leave it, I guess there's no sense on the board that we wish to petition not to have elections in the way that we do it. I mean, if we're the only ones that have them, I suppose theoretically we could ask the county to change that. But I mean, is there any sense on the board that they'd rather go for a sort of a backroom nominating process rather than, I can't imagine there would be, but has anybody got any thoughts on that?
That was what I had in mind. The idea is we could save a lot of money, if nothing else. It's a much simpler process if the board elects members.
As I said at the beginning, you're going to be obligated to do that anyway, because at the end of the day, we still have to go through the process of having you complete the Board of County Commissioners application, submit them in order for the commission to consider them. And it is theoretically possible that you could have what amounts to a straw ballot, and the county commission, for whatever reason, you know, appoint someone other than that. That has never occurred, but that's a possibility.
Okay, all right.
We'll do some additional fact-finding, and in turn, we'll need to have a subsequent discussion. I
think, just for the record, I think, Chad, you'd mentioned to me that the reimbursement number that we've typically had on our own elections has been in the $10,000 range, so this is a little more expensive, but it's not a huge number. So that didn't change dramatically anything here, so...
well, it's $16,000 more dollars. I got to find it.
I understand. Although I think it's also true in the last couple of elections, not necessarily healthy, that we actually haven't had an election, right? Because we've never had a contested election for the last 4 years. So that's not necessarily good, but it's what's happened. So, okay, let's move on.
The next two items, these are verbal updates. Staff has recently held 2 pre-application meetings with the South Florida Water Management District and the United States Army Corps of Engineers for 2 separate matters, one involving the potential amendment to our existing surface water management permit to enclose the Bay Colony dune swale. That has been an issue that first came to the board during the public comment process a number of months ago. For the new members of the board, there's a very unique feature within Bay Colony that collects water, stormwater, on the backside of the dune that is there and conveys that in essence, in the wrong direction, that most water flows in southwest Florida. Most water flows to the southwest in our part of Florida. In this case, the water runs north and then makes a 90-degree turn adjacent to the Bay Colony Club and goes under the road through a box culvert and then out into a spreader swale in the upper reaches of the mangrove estuary at Bay Colony. But it is absolutely critical to the effective drainage of the community. The swale is an open, meandering sort of feature that was originally a natural type feature. Over time, it has also had mangroves that kind of came up in there on a volunteer basis. The long and the short of it is this: at the pre-app meeting, the state told us that the large portions of the existing swale are inside of the coastal construction control line. This is a universal line that is established by meets and bounds surveys against the entire peninsula of Florida has a predetermined coastal construction control line, and trying to construct or alter any feature within that area or seaward of that area is a very difficult thing to do. So we're going to do some further verification of that, but I just wanted to report to you that we went to Fort Myers, we had the pre-app meeting. Their initial impression of the potential enclosure of what is otherwise an open wetland drainage feature was frankly somewhat negative. But we're going to prepare some exhibits and, if necessary, impose or show the coastal construction control line within the exhibit to fully respond and report that back to the Water Management Committee. The second project was to begin a year in advance the renewal of our Clam Pass maintenance permits. With the Corps, there's a corresponding permit that would be required by the DEP. And in that particular regard, we wanted to start a year in advance. Those permits will expire at the end of next March. The Army Corps of Engineers district office in Fort Myers has been inundated with permit activity as a result of normal growth and required work post Hurricane Ian and Milton and Helene. And they were not certain that they could address our application within a year because of the backlog and some staffing shortages and whatnot. So their request of us was to file for an extension, which is of the existing permits, which is an administrative process that they have, and they can extend those upon receipt of our request for as long as 2 years. So that would take us into the spring of 2028. Given the fact that we have some other issues, and we were recently at a county commission workshop in part related to Clam Pass, there is well-informed interest within the city of Naples, communities of Naples Cay and Seagate, to evaluate some other dredge and fill templates and doing some modeling and whatnot. So I say all of that to say this, that upon receipt of our extension, it will give us a little bit of additional time, again, through the Clam Bay Committee to go back and either embolden some of the original logic and rationale or to perhaps do some, renewed modeling or design sort of alternatives. But both of those items occurred in the last month, and I just wanted to update you on that today.
Can I ask a question regarding the extension? Were we going to be asking for additional rights to do either more dredging or more beach renourishment? What was our new permit going to ask?
You can't do that through an extension process. You would be required to do that with a new permit. So anything beyond the existing cut and fill design that is there would not be eligible. We are eligible to do certain what are called permit modifications, and we have done a permit modification, but those are more small scale. The most recent one that we did was to enlarge the sand fill area on the north side of the inlet adjacent to South Beach and the foundation's amenities. So we were able to do that to lengthen the sand fill area through a letter mod, but nothing that I would call a redesign.
So what were we asking for in the new permit? Were we going to be asking for the ability to dredge more?
I'm saying we have the time to
If we didn't
evaluate.
extend it, could we still try to apply for the new permit and change the wording if
No,
you were?
I think not, because that was the reason for the pre-application meeting. Before you file an application for any permit, you're obligated to have a pre-application meeting to introduce or explain what it is that you're going to be completing an application for. And it was at that time that they told us that they were not assured that they could process their application before it expires in next March. And so they've asked us to file a written request to extend that permit to give them more time to evaluate any renewal.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment or two?
Let me just see if there's any board comment before we get to...
Sure.
I just want to clarify something, Neil. In the past, as you know, we have been successful in getting the permit modifications, which we think we need to improve our management. Does getting an extension foreclose modifying the extended permit in that 2-year period?
I think not, but I would want to confirm that with the engineer.
The only other comment I had was that the work or the early investigation, if you like, that's been going on and the conversation's been going on with the folks to our south in Naples Cay and so on, relate to water issues that they're experiencing, and they are outside the Pelican Bay PUD, outside the NERPR, and therefore our position at this point is that we're willing to work with them to see whether we could do some things that might help them. We are very reluctant to spend Pelican Bay money on fixing their problem, right? And so we've got, although we're going to continue to work with them, we've got to find some way of working with them and whoever else they want to get to support them in terms of financing some of this additional activity that they may be requesting. Our own work goes on, as Mike suggested, through our consultant to make sure that our prime objective, which is the maintenance of the health of the mangroves, is done in a way that that the dredging that we undertake on our own initiative is adequate for that purpose. And obviously, at the moment, we believe it is, but it's always under review, and that's one of the major ongoing, constant activities of the Clam Bay Committee. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Need rain.
Water now is standing and isn't flowing into the
drain pipe that goes under the road where the main Valley from out into Plant Bay. So right now, it's almost, most of the water behind the building is green now, and it's going to attract all kinds of bugs and mosquitoes and everything else. And I think it's a problem that needs to be dealt with pretty quickly. I'm only speculating as to what I think the problem is. My own personal view is I think it's drain is stretched too low, and the water is not south. The second thing I'd like to comment on with the meeting with the South Florida Water Management District. I really hope that the board and the Development and Services continues to pursue this issue despite the fact that the swale is at or near or on coastal line. First of all, the swale is not has never been a natural thing. It's actually constructed. Look at the time Bay Colony was constructed as a drainage ditch, basically. And that's number one. Number two, I still don't see any reason why the authorities, whoever they are, South Florida Water Management or Florida Management else, would be opposed to covering up drainage ditch. That's basically what we got. And there are a lot of cost-effective ways to do it. I initially suggested chlorinated steel pipe. It's the engineers that did the study for the Public Health Service Division priced out the single most expensive way of doing it, which is the concrete culvert. There's also the staff, Chad mentioned at the last meeting, that there are plastic pipe options, which are very inexpensive. I looked into that, and in fact there are, I mentioned plastic pipe materials that are very cost-effective to do that. And this is not rocket science. I mean, we're talking about a drainage ditch. Put a plastic pipe culvert in and run it down. It's an inexpensive way to solve a problem that's actually hasn't been solved and it gets worse. So I would really urge the board to get serious about readdressing this issue and going back to the Florida Water Management District, Florida engineers, or whoever might have any jurisdiction over this. It ought to get done, and I think we are pressing. And if it's not done, this board is going to be faced with a continual repeating cycle of expenditures that will have to go through to fix this problem. And as all of you know, it's costing almost $1 million to dredge out that thing and remediate it. And we're not finished doing it yet. And we have another storm. Los Angeles storm, it's going to cost another $1 million. And this could happen next year. It could happen the next 3 years. Who knows? But it's a recurring issue that needs to be addressed. I don't think we ought to let some regulatory body who thinks they have jurisdiction tell us that we can't do this. I think we ought to press it very hard and necessary use of force to go to challenge where we knew it was. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I think we ought to press it too hard because that's my suggestion to the board. And I think it's an important budgetary long-range issue for this PBSD, and I think it needs to get addressed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Final thing that I had today, just in the interest of time, are the mid-year financial statements that are behind the next tab in your materials there. There was also some supplemental project updates, but that was for information purposes. But these financials, as a result of March the 31st, or what is mid-year, you will see that there was $12,166,000 in cash on hand at the end of the month. Additionally, there were $733,000 in payables that are shown on the liability portion of the balance sheet. Additionally, there are unspent funds that are held separately and shown separately on the balance sheet for capital projects that total $4.9 million, and then county required reserves of one nature or the other that run the gamut from cash flow and operating contingencies to the debt service sinking fund and whatnot that total an additional $781,000. If you look on the next page at the beginning of the what is the income statement, you will see that a surprising $122,000 in non-ad valorem assessments came in during the month of March. I think we'll see a similar amount in April. As you know, taxes become delinquent in April, and so many people who pay their tax bill towards the end of March, they will not actually get recorded and then dispersed by the tax collector until early in April. So I think we'll see some additional non-ad valorem assessments. Year-to-date revenues, though, through 6 months of that source are at 92% of the original forecast for the year. As I look at the various cost centers in both your operating account for water management and landscape and beautification, which we refer to as the general fund, and then the associated street lighting fund on the next page, those are typically the ones that the board focuses on. The source of funds for the street lighting fund are actually ad valorem taxes as opposed to the non-ad valorem special assessment that is applied uniformly for the fund prior to this one. So property taxes in this case, non-ad valorem assessment in the previous case, both appearing and come to us from the tax collector. Also, year-to-date receipts in the street lighting fund are at 92%, and additionally, the total operating expenses are within the year-to-date forecast for there. I think with that, I'll just stop, see if you have any questions. We're going to get into a little further discussion as part of the tentative budget that is further on the agenda. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all that I have today.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Okay, let's move quickly on to committee reports. We have Joe would like to give us an update on the landscape and safety meeting.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those of you with an agenda packet could follow this as we go through it, because there are several items that do require some visual understanding. The committee met on March 27th in this building of this year. Corporal Reed from the Collier County Sheriff's Office gave us a report, and it was pretty interesting. The report that he gave said that, I'll give you some stats, that from January 1st of this year till March 23rd of this year, deputy-initiated contacts in Pelican Bay, there were 1,435 traffic stops, 3 crashes with injuries, and 9 crashes with no injuries. There was another stat that he mentioned, and Chad can help me out if we need to give it any more specifics, but all encounters from the sheriff's deputy's office, not just deputy initiated where they saw something, but 911 calls or resident initiated. There were over 3,000 interactions between the sheriff's office and Pelican Bay. Some of that, a small number was on 41, and they kind of clumped it into our community. But that was pretty eye-opening that there's that much going on in season. And it covered everything from someone fell down and needed help being picked up, or they saw somebody that looked kind of sketchy and they called the sheriff's office. It covered the gamut of things, but I think the crashes and traffic stops should let you know that The deputies are here. I see them all the time, and I see them stop people for running lights. So it is a frustration. At the committee, there were residents who were really frustrated with not seeing deputies around, but they are here. We pay for extra patrols, and this includes, if I'm not wrong, both extra patrols and their patrols. Correct. Okay. So that was illuminating, and you should feel comfortable that the sheriff's office is covering Pelican Bay. There was a sidewalk update. QE, our contractor, will finish a punch list of corrections that has been given to them, and they'll perform 2 additional work directives to be totally done. Once that is done, there's a year's warranty for the sidewalks that they constructed. Item 3 on the report is a action item, and you'll have to follow it with me, please. The staff asked Johnson Engineering to provide us with a remedy for our problems with our crosswalks. They're constantly needing repair. The main issues, I think these were the ones I distilled out, are that they're ADA non-compliant, they're very costly to maintain and repair, and they do provide very serious issues, safety issues for pedestrians and even for vehicles. Mr. Chairman and my fellow board members, I'm going to read a narrative that would lead us to a motion that I'd like to make at the end. Those in the audience could follow some of those photographs, and these are just classic depictions of what we're running into with our crosswalks. And the last photograph illustrates a cyclist that was seriously hurt from hitting one of these defects in the crosswalk. So if I may, I am going to read this, since it's better that I be very particular and correct in my comments before a discussion is made or my motion is made. Our sand pavers, sand set pavers, definitely are unique. They're different and they're really attractive. And I think initially when that was determined to be the type of crosswalks we would have, and it seemed like probably a good idea. But they're also very, very difficult to construct to ADA compliant specifications. The Americans with Disabilities Act, they have specifications for almost everything that's constructed. And not only the sidewalks, but also the crosswalks.
A crosswalk.
So construction to that code or specification is very difficult, and it's even more difficult to maintain and repair. And we've found that out over the years, and it's coming to a head at this point. The director of the Collier County Road, Bridge, and Stormwater Maintenance Division indicated that to Karen Herman, our project manager, that they stay away from pavers due to their failures. The director also mentioned that concrete is not a bad option in lieu of paver crosswalks. What we have found out is water intrusion from seasonal rains or even heavy rains, the recent storm surge from hurricanes, heavy truck and car traffic, and unknown defects in construction have led to multiple ongoing failures of our 26 paver crosswalks. I didn't realize we had that many, but we have a lot. The failures are corrected, and other failures are detected while we're correcting, and even the ones that are corrected, we turn around and in a couple of weeks, they're failing. So it's become evident to staff that our crosswalks can't be maintained to ADA specifications, in a timely manner, because once we find something, there's another crosswalk that is out of compliance. So, Mr. Chairman and my fellow board members, I'd like to make a motion, or if you'd rather have discussion first, to address this problem.
Yeah, you go ahead and make the motion, and we'll discuss it.
My motion is that I move that the Pelican Bay Services Division Board approves that our staff proceed with a pilot project to replace the Sunset paver crosswalks at the intersection of Gulf Park Drive and Ridgewood Drive with dyed stamped concrete resembling the color and pattern of the existing pavers. If you look at the backup material in your packet, you can see Johnson's Engineering depiction of what a dyed concrete stamped crosswalk would look like. It would resemble what we have, but it would be one solid piece of concrete that has been stamped.
Okay.
Okay, that's the motion.
Is there a second for
Are
the
we going to have discussion about this?
Is there a
Thank
second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, then board discussion. Questions?
Just a question.
Yep.
Do we have a budget cost for it?
Chad, you got, what's your estimate on the, this is for the pilot project only, right?
Yeah, this would just be for an initial pilot project construction under 100,000. We've already expensed the engineering.
Where would the project be?
What's that?
Where would the project be?
A Gulf Park Drive and Ridgewood Drive, that intersection there are two crosswalks. It's across from the Villas of Pelican Bay, I think. It's in your packet. Johnson's presentation, there are several pages that were part of his presentation. You can certainly look that over to help pinpoint it.
How long between finishing the pilot project and a go-ahead on the complete project to see if this stuff is holding up against traffic and is at least, reasonably attractive?
Yeah, we did not discuss that. Obviously, only time will tell. And that's why it's a pilot project. It's the best remedy of all the ones that are available. We don't want to put asphalt down and have that type of crosswalk. We want to try to have the community look just about the way it is now, but have the nature of the crosswalk such that it doesn't fail constantly. And the repairs, even of a small little area, it runs into thousands of dollars. And the fact that they keep on failing is the dilemma that we've got to do something that lasts. And the fact that we're not compliant is very critical, especially if someone gets injured.
Any other questions?
Well, I did attend that meeting, and there were people from the audience who were very concerned about the stamped concrete because they thought that would cheapen the look of our overall community. And I believe the budget was going to be over $1 million by the time we completed the project, if I'm correct. He did talk about the ability of pavers to be built another way that would hold up much better than what they do currently. I just do want to revisit, why are we not compliant? Why are we not repairing them in time? Whose responsibility is that?
Well, I'll answer for staff, but there are two ways that we've done it. We've contracted out, and I think we've done it ourselves some. Ask me that one question again.
So there was a gentleman that got up and spoke that day who had said that he was involved in doing pavers for Club Pelican Bay and other places, and then the gentleman who introduced the whole project to us. But I thought, if we're going to substantially change our crosswalk from these brick pavers that have held up for a number of years, like 30 years, to now do stamped concrete. I think our membership weigh in on the look of it, Joe. I think we should put up the 2 pictures of what it will look like, and maybe we could put it in the Pelican Bay Post and let people weigh in on what that will look like for our future for all of our crosswalks. I'm just wondering if we can't get more support that way.
I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be effective. The fact is, I think we're reaching critical mass as far as we really need to do something. You know, the residents here certainly can weigh in during this discussion for the motion. The committee didn't actually make have a vote, and the reason was we did not know what the county would agree to, or you know, be able to give us the green light on. But obviously, concrete would be something they would approve. They don't like pavers. One of their options is asphalt, and we don't like that either. So this seems to be the only remedy that I see personally that can mimic what we have, but be more stable, be compliant. Unfortunately, Cindy, it's impossible to have 26 pavers evaluated constantly for repairs and then go out to bid or do it ourselves and keep up with the problem. It's such an ongoing problem that you know, right now, I know when you leave Pelican Bay on Pelican Bay North, Boulevard North, there's a place that just becomes a pothole because it can't be maintained. And traffic is really heavy in Pelican Bay, as everyone might know. So my feeling is that the motion allows for a pilot project that will allow evaluation and determination. Since we have 23 of them, there would be a pecking order of importance, I'm sure, but we would have to go back and really evaluate how we're going to do it and how many years it would take and what the budget would be. At this point, the motion is just for a pilot project to see if we can find something, and in this case, stamped concrete that's dyed, that would give us an alternative that seems to be much more manageable and more stable than what we have now.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to make a comment? Can you just state your name and where you're from?
My name is Sue. The location of the pilot? The location of the pilot is where, please?
Gulf Park Drive and Ridgewood Drive.
Okay, so we're going to do a pilot on a pretty central intersection. It's got sidewalks on both sides of Gulf Park as well as Ridgewood. So isn't there a place we could select that's got maybe a single crosswalk that's not part of a big intersection? Because if we don't like the way it looks, dyed concrete, don't like the color, it seems like a pretty important intersection to be doing a pilot on.
That intersection only has 2 crosswalks. It's not a full 4 crosswalk. It's just got 2 crosswalks.
It's got 2 crosswalks, a Gulf Park and on Ridgewood.
Correct. But
So
the
while
other
there's
ones
while there's an
4.
association across the street, it's still one of the main thoroughfares. It seems like somewhere either off of Creighton, the Creighton dead end, or over by, now Artis is a bad idea. The sidewalk that goes, okay, well, you're shaking your head, so there's no other place besides that sidewalk.
I'm shaking my head to him. He's asking me a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So.
Okay, all right, concerned about where it is, I understand. Is there any other issue?
Well, I'm concerned about where it is, because if we're going to do a pilot.
Understood, yeah, understood, okay.
So will you please look at other options?
Well,
all of the existing crosswalks are either on the arterial road network or the major collectors. We don't have any brick paver crosswalks in residential areas that are ours.
That are ours. So the crosswalk that goes
There's not one at the end of Creighton.
at the beginning of Creighton, off of Pelican Bay Boulevard?
At the beginning, yes, on Pelican Bay Boulevard.
So I'll take a look and see if I can find another one to
Yeah.
recommend.
Okay, maybe, I guess maybe Joe, on your committee, you could take that point on and see whether there's another location. But I guess the sense is you'd like to try a pilot project somewhere with a different medium here, because the current one is not standing up to traffic, right? And I forget, how long ago did we put those pavers in?
It's been about 12 years.
Is it 12 years? Okay.
To Cindy's point, the existing crosswalks were constructed about 12 years ago in phases, and functioned reasonably well for about 10 years, and then have rapidly deteriorated in the last 2, in my opinion.
All right, so the motion on the floor is that we
somebody-
approve a pilot project at a location to be determined to try with this stamped concrete, which seems, you've tried, I guess your discussions covered alternatives, and this was the only really main alternative that was viable, is that right?
Yeah, this was the engineer's recommendation of the other possibilities. And then the reason why we did not have a vote or a motion at the committee level was because we didn't know about the county's opinion. And the county's opinion was pretty clear. Stay away from pavers. Asphalt, because you see, they want to put asphalt, put 2 lines, and you got a crosswalk. But obviously, we have a different situation. So they thought that the stamped concrete was very viable, and
Okay.
that's why we can't make a recommendation from the committee.
Public comment.
Sorry, somebody else. Yes, go ahead. Is it on, Susan?
Okay. Jean Gathman.
Oh, that's better. Okay.
Okay. One of the comments on the, maybe perhaps the aesthetics of it, and she said perhaps to put it at the end of a dead-end street or something like that. I guess my worry would be if we put it somewhere because we don't like the look of it, it wouldn't get the test of the efficacy of it. So why, we have to have it in an area, or at least think about, it needs to be in an area that gets plenty of traffic with the heavy vehicles and everything else, so that we know that
Right.
it holds up as you're hoping it to do.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yeah, Susan?
2 weeks ago, I sat at the committee meeting and listened to the engineer's recommendations, and he was not strongly in favor of this. He was just presenting all the options, and there was significant pushback in the room at the time about doing anything but pavers. And Joe, I get that the county staff is suggesting that stamped concrete might be the best alternative, but this just has not been processed. There was no commitment, there was no consensus at the committee meeting that, we should seriously look at stamped concrete and only just confirm that with the county, and then we're ready to go with a recommendation to this board. You folks have a strong committee process in place where you allow committees to weigh in on things, and then that committee recommendation comes to the board. And we're just totally bypassing this 2 weeks after a committee met and just decided not to move ahead with it at this particular time, but continue to consider the information. You're wanting to move ahead, and I just think this needs a little bit more time to process, and more people need to know what's going on here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to real quickly say there is a one path in front of the St. Raphael, the one that leads to the beach. That's just one. It's not 3 or 4, 2. It's just
Right,
one.
yeah. Yeah, I think that one was the last one we put in, as I remember. Okay, look, I don't think we want to get hung up on this. Maybe, Joe, you could take this back into committee and see if you can get a consensus here. I mean, I think the change, as I understood it, was there was some discussion about doing this in total at the committee meeting, and the proposal here was for a pilot. But it sounds as though I'm not hearing a good I'm hearing the current system doesn't work, and is expensive to maintain and doesn't meet ADA requirements. I'm hearing it's one alternative. I'm sensing from you that there aren't any other good alternatives, but let's take another look at it and see if there's anything else in there that we can take a look at, okay? So is that okay? We table that for now?
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
There's a comment.
You'll need to come.
Can you, sorry, yes, go.
Bill McCormick again. In looking at the alternatives, I think maybe they've looked at this, but maybe they ought to look at something other than a paver sand set. There are ways of setting the pavers that are, sand set can be easily disturbed, and that's what's happening. The vehicles going across it, loosen them up and go. But there are ways of setting them in concrete, in mortar, that are much stronger. So I think as one of the alternatives that ought to be looked at is a different way of setting the pavers rather than leaving them in a sand set.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
There was actually another method of putting the pavers in that was much more substantial than a sand set, and that was discussed at length at the meeting. That's what I thought we were going to go that direction, Joe. I'm surprised to hear stamped concrete now, but I really feel like our community should weigh in. This is a big project, and once again, we're looking at spending a lot on capital, and I keep going back to the fact that we can repair them to make them safe for the time being and let the community weigh in. I think that's the right thing to do. And once again, we keep adding to our capital budget like the $10 million in sidewalks. But our beaches, which is all of our concern right now, I'm wondering why we're not putting more capital money towards our capital of our restaurants, beaches, and mangroves. We're doing sidewalks now. And
Michael,
we're doing
can I just have a minute on
and I just feel like they should weigh in. It's a big change.
Thank you.
I didn't realize this was going to come up for a motion, but I certainly would like some time to consult with the foundation on this, because this is a serious promotion. I don't know about Neil, but I live in a town in New Jersey that tried stamped concrete, and it was a disaster.
It cracks.
It cracks, the paint fades, and the town had to redo everything. So, it seems to me we ought to maybe have some research from people who've used this, because my experience has not been good.
Fair enough.
May I make a comment in defense of the committee? Making the motion, having the discussion, having the little narrative that I read is all part of the process. So obviously, it's not a clear-cut situation, and it wasn't at the committee level. But we got to start the ball rolling someplace and starting to get our being aware of a very critical situation that staff has been trying to grapple with for several years. So I think it's a good process to have, and there's nothing wrong with the dialogue that has happened here, because it just shows that we need to investigate it more than it has been. If we didn't bring it up, nothing would be said in public.
And just quick point of clarification, the existing installation is on a poured concrete base. They're backfilled with sand because it will allow a little bit of movement. If you try to have mortar joints and brick pavers that are subjected to that kind of loading, it's a whole nother set of cracking. But I want you to know that they're not sand set, but they are filled with sand in order to give them a little ability to move, but they're on a concrete base.
Okay, so this is waded into detail that typically should be brought out in the Landscape Safety Committee meeting. So let's move on to the next item, Joe.
Okay, the next item is another action item, and it's the pedestrian activated flashing crosswalk lights, better known as RRFBs. We asked the county to do a study of North Point Drive, Hammock Oak Drive, and the intersection of those two roads with Pelican Bay Boulevard. We have been asked over the years to do something for the safety of those crosswalks. And unfortunately, the traffic study was a traffic study. They just counted cars and accidents. They really were not on site to make a visual of pedestrians. The crosswalk light, the RFBs at San Marino, luckily at that place, there was a county official watching people try to cross Pelican Bay Boulevard, and that observation really helped make that a place where the RFBs would be workable. So right now we have 2 of them on the boulevard, one at San Marino and one at the North Tram station, right across from Pebble Creek. So I'm going to read a little narrative as a little background and get the discussion going, because the alternatives need to be discussed. We did take a straw poll, not a poll for the committee to make a recommendation, but the straw poll was a 3-2, and there was a consensus that what we're about to discuss was approved. I need to continue my speech, my dialogue.
Address that statistic you just given.
No, not right now.
No, you're not recognized.
Okay.
I'll make these observations, then you can add your opinion, just like everybody else.
Thank you.
So this is in response to the county saying that they didn't think that either crosswalk required any facility to make them safer than they are, and they're not safe. But the reason why we had the studies was there was numerous resident requests, and Commissioner Hall's office was asked by a resident also to make an opinion. And staff asked the county to do these studies to see what can be done to make them safer. Unfortunately, the traffic studies, as I mentioned, were vehicular and histories. They were not conducted like the San Marino one, with actually seeing what pedestrians have to go through trying to get across the street. So I mention this because these crosswalks, and most crosswalks in Pelican Bay, are not safe. Unfortunately, they are at the mercy of the public, and human beings, being what they are, don't really like to stop. So as a result, a three-way stop was not viable, and the only other viable possibility would be a flashing light that's activated by the pedestrian that will alert the traffic that somebody is crossing. Even with that, and I realize the fallacy of this, is that one, the pedestrian has to activate the light, and two, the cars, the trucks have to obey and adhere to stopping and yielding to a pedestrian. But having said that, I think to address this is important, because residents have been asking for something, and there was a straw vote. It was just, would you be in favor of a flashing light? And it was a 3-2 vote. So with that, I will turn it over to the chairman, but I can make a motion which would ask this board their opinion and whether or not a flashing light is something we should proceed with.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the agenda, actually.
Yep.
I believe this is considered a committee report, and on all agendas of all boards that I've been on, when there's an action item, it's actually listed as an action item, where
Yep.
these just look like they are committee reports. So I do not believe an action can come out of a committee report.
The
So
items
I'm not
on the
familiar.
agenda have an asterisk by them.
I'm sorry?
The items on the agenda have an asterisk by them, which, if you look down the page there, it says possible board action.
Okay.
That's not to say we have to, but, so Joe, let me put this in, we knew there was, identified a problem at these two intersections. Our first choice was to see whether or not we could get a three-way stop at those intersections, right? I'm not sure this is the first time that we've done this, but at least this time it's failed again to get the appropriate statistical support for installing three-way stops. The active flashing sidewalk or backup solution, if you want to call it that, we have implemented in other places in the community. But your board committee voted 3-2 on this. Was there some...
It was not a recommendation to this board. It was a straw vote to see what the committee members felt about a flashing light.
How do we do a straw vote?
Yeah.
I was at that
Mr. Chairman, could I just explain that a little bit further?
Go ahead. Right.
All right. So this was the so-called... There were 5 people in the room, and there was 1 person on the telephone. The question was raised, do we want more flashing lights in Pelican Bay? Forget about where. Do we want more flashing lights in Pelican Bay? Of the 5 people in the room, 3 voted, no, we don't want any more, and 2 voted, yes, we are okay with it. The 3 that voted that they didn't want it included Brad Heidelbrand, who in fact can vote in a straw vote but can't vote in a real vote because he is a resident, he's a foundation appointed member of this community, not an elected member. The guy on the phone was Greg Stone. Now, although a member of this board, you can't vote if you're on the phone. So what we had here was we took out the 2 votes for the foundation member and the guy on the phone, and it was 2-2. It was not a consensus to go ahead. And so to bring that thing to this board, to the main board, for action without having a go-ahead from the subcommittee is a gross breach of procedure. And I think we should send this right back to subcommittee where it belongs and really thrash out the details.
Okay, is that fair summary, Joe, of what?
I don't think it's fair. It was a straw vote. It wasn't a vote to make a recommendation. So I think Greg's opinion was important. Unfortunately, Brad is not a voting member in any way, shape, or form, and it was a 3-2 in favor as a consensus, and I took that because we need to have this dialogue started to make these 2 intersections safer.
Okay. I think there is a point of order here, and I think...
Can we ask the public?
Do need to... No, I just want to cut this off here, if you don't mind. I think there's a point of order here in the sense that in order for us to vote on this, really, we do need a firm recommendation and a vote from the committee. So absent that, I think I'm going to table these 2 items for now. I think, to Joe's point, the dialogue on these things is important. Pedestrian safety at these intersections is of concern. The crosswalk pavers are a concern. So let's get this back in committee. Let's get some additional discussion and then bring it back to the board at an appropriate time. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Roanna Handy. I cross those walks every day, walking my dog, the flashing light ones, and they give you a false sense of security. The cars don't stop, and you think they're going to stop, and you get halfway across the road and have to jerk yourself and your dog back. I see it happen like every other day. It's a wonder someone hasn't been killed there yet.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. Can we? Neil, did you have something? No?
I was going to suggest, would you be willing to take a 5-minute recess just to give Barbara a little break? Got a long meeting today and opportunity to maybe move around and reconvene in 5 minutes?
Sure, okay. Let's do that. 5 minutes, back at 3.
Thank
back
you.
At 3 o'clock. Yeah, okay, we'll pick that up at the end then, okay.
That's good to table it.
Yeah.
We do, if we didn't start it here, when are we going to start it? So now we know some of the problem.
Yeah, all right.
Here's my man. Hey, Mike. little fireworks, huh? I love it.
Well, we rarely have anybody, it's unusual. Well, the part of the problem is that everybody's up in arms with the foundation at the moment about doing things without audience participation. So now they want to have a say on everything. I know. Well, yeah, but you say that in public and you'll be harmed. I know what you mean, yeah. At some point, I think the point is you have to get down to a couple of alternatives and the board has to vote, and then you have to decide by that. But this one doesn't look... Yeah, I know. Well, we always say when it's on the agenda, we talk later in the meeting. I understand what you're saying.
Just make
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Just procedures for pictures. I sit on corporate desk. We would never bring something out of committee.
Yeah. I think, yeah, no, I agree. Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. I think this was originally put on the agenda because this was meant to be a fairly small project. It's got our hands, so, okay.
We should maintain those conversations without emotion.
Right.
Unless it's a discussion.
Right, you're right.
The only point is I don't have a vote. I would like to respect the vote here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is how do you get that input?
Well, I'll work on that one.
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
at the meetings I was sort of dismissed it.
I see.
Well, I do have it.
I see, okay. Yeah, all right, okay, thanks, yeah.
Does it look like it?
Mike is going to take care of it. Teasing you. Good to see you. I'm happy to take care of it. Cindy. She's going to be tough. They've got two it's not personal. Go back to the drawing board. I don't care, but talk about it. Asphalt. The county would you say these? You know what it is? It's the connection gets broken so easily with traffic and water and the twisting of the vehicle. Yeah. So.
The last person.
The what?
I mean, are they big papers, or are they just branded lines? Something tells me we're just going to stay with repairing
It is, yeah.
Make sure you don't.
They're not stable.
The number of cracks. And really serious cracks.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's reconvene here and get started. Okay, let's get to the point of the meeting where the fun part of the meeting deals with money. In the package of material, there's a couple of slides in there that deal with a summary of the preliminary budget for next year that the staff have put together with the budget committee, and a summary chart on the front which converts that into an assessment summary. Just by way of setting the stage here, typically the budget cycle here starts in March, with the staff being requested to submit preliminary information to the county around the April-May timeframe. There's a deliberative process that goes through with the county, with all the county departments through May and June. I think the official budgets get approved by the county commissioners in August, I think, thereabouts. So we're on the very early preliminary stage of the budget process here. Unfortunately, it requires us to make at least a decent guess as to what our assessment and budget requirements are for the 25-26 fiscal year here in the March-April timeframe. That requires us to essentially, it puts in an awkward situation because we essentially have to guess at the outcome of two hurricane seasons. One that's going to occur between now and October 1st, and then another one which will start in June of next year and then sometime in October of next year. So, for example, in this fiscal year, the one we're in right now, we sustained damage from both hurricanes Helene and Milton, right? Substantially put substantial strain on our budget. We essentially drained out a contingency reserve which we had carried for that purpose for a number of years, and we raided some of our capital projects in order to fund the cleanup and that you've been hearing about on the Dune Swale and on the back beaches. That essentially flushes us out of our typical contingency reserve and has reduced our ability to fund some of our capital projects. The same thing could happen next year. We have no idea. And so one of the things that we were anxious to do this year, in addition to addressing the refurbishment of the beach, which we'll get to in a minute, was to reestablish that contingency reserve that we had in going into this fiscal year as part of the operating budget. So you can see that we're, based on that, you can see that we're dealing with a number of uncertainties, and the best case you can do is to try and, provide for some degree of cover in the event of we have similar events happening next year, and to try and continue to pursue the capital improvement areas that we've been working on for a number of years. So if you take a look at the, I'll give you the overview because I think the best way to discuss it with residents of the community is in the way of assessments. If you take a look at the assessment summary, you see listed there the 24-25 assessment, which is the one we're currently in. And then we've tried to break the budget for next year into two pieces, one of which was I've classified here as the regular budget, which is, this is essentially what we'd be proposing had we not had the events of Helene and Milton last year. And then the sort of a special assessment. It doesn't come out as a special assessment, but it's an additional item that would not normally typically be in the budget to give us a total, all right? So in high-level summary, what the regular budget in operations looks like is a 3% increase over this year's budget. Chad and his team have put together a bottoms-up budget that comes in slightly less than that at the moment, but there are a number of open items from the county that have not been resolved yet, and they're not likely to go in our favor, I think. And there's also a number of items which is deliberately held on, waiting to see the outcome of the total budget. But the sense of the budget committee, as we met last week, was that a 3% increase in operating budget in an environment where currently the general inflation rate is higher than that and likely to, with current events going on in the economy, likely to increase over the next 18 months, is probably the best we can hope for. So I think at 3%, Chad's still managing to maintain all of the current activities and the level of services that are currently provided, plus he always finds some way to deal with some of the unexpected items that arise during the year, whether they're hurricane related or otherwise, to keep us within an overall envelope of a 3% increase in basic operations. The Clam Bay account shows an increase, although it's not a large, in the scheme of things, not a large amount of money. It does show an increase, a significant increase over last year because of additional work that is required as a result of the hurricane activity that we had last year. As you probably know, the Clam Bay activities are sort of a joint activity between ourselves and the county, right? We spend some of our money digging back channels and various things in the mangroves. The county provides us some money to do some additional work, and then of course the county provides the funds for the dredges that take place in Clam Bay. They don't come out of this budget. The county have devolved management of the dredging process, if you like, or the administration of the dredging activity to us, but we are able to claim the actual expense for that out of the county's tourist tax dollars, and so it doesn't hit our budget. So the money out of Clam Bay is primarily for activities that go on within Clam Bay that we ourselves do in conjunction mainly with the county there. And in the capital budget, again, it's been split into different pieces, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. The plan that we've had in place for a number of years now recognizes that we're playing catch up on a lot of the capital infrastructure in Pelican Bay. The main things that we are responsible for that require money are beaches, the storm water management system, which mainly involves conduits and pipes and things that that continue to flow. And we're finding increasing activity necessary to maintain those. So overall, the capital budget we planned to provide us the capacity to do a number of things going forward, including two main provisions in there. One is currently we have debt outstanding of about $5 million on the sidewalks. The county is still providing us funds in there to help fund that activity to the tune of about, $500,000 a year. That terminates in 2028, I think. And we'll have additional years left on the debt to repay. So we're trying to build capacity in the budget to be able to plant that $500,000 income that we get. And we've also got on the horizon a project to periodically we go around and we try and rehabilitate some of the lakes in Pelican Bay. And there is the Water Management Committee has a priority list of lakes that we would like to get to over time. We've deferred on some of those recently because of other funding requirements. The next one up is going to be the community lake here. That's been partly deferred recently because, of course, the foundation has been unclear yet as to how they're going to go about remodeling this facility. But once they do that, some remediation of this lake will be part of that, and so we're looking ahead to try and provide money for that. So those things have been in our plans for several years now. So if we were just to take those plans and sort of transition them forward, you would end up at the $292 assessment that is shown on this sheet, which basically is about a 5.7% increase. We've essentially been running on the basis of inflation in operations only, because we're basically we're in a steady state on operations because we're basically built out at this point, and the staffing levels and things that we have to do all the maintenance activities are pretty stable. So the additional monies that we've been planning on raising have all gone into the capital fund, which had been significantly underfunded in prior years. So our target has been inflation plus 2.5% to 3% each year as an assessment increase, the bulk of which goes into the capital funds. That's what this year would result in the $292 assessment. So if you add what I call the regular assessment up, you end up at just over $1,000, which is the 5.5% increase that's in this current proposal. The special assessment is all to do with the damage from the hurricanes, okay? We currently have a assessment from our consultant that works for us. He works for the county and has been up and down the coast over the last month or so, 2 months or so, I guess, assessing the damage that was caused by those hurricanes last year. As part of that process, he comes up, there's a template that exists for sand and beach sand up and down the coast. They do an assessment, essentially, a survey of the situation up and down the coast, and they compare it to the standard template that's required, and they come up with an amount of sand that's required to refill the template to get it back to where it was. The county are already in the process of filling that template south of us here, down in Naples right now, and their plan is to do the same thing from Vanderbilt Drive north in the fall, probably in October. We also employ a consultant to give us essentially the same readout on our beach, which is essentially stretches from about half a mile south of Vanderbilt down to the pass. Okay, now we're responsible for that. Pelican Bay Service Division is responsible for that financially in order to essentially preserve our private access to the beach. Okay, the county will not spend county money on private access beach, so we're responsible for that. Our consultants, going through the same process, has estimated that refilling that template in that stretch of beach is going to cost somewhere in the order of $4 million, $4 to $5 million, $4 to $4.5 million. That's a significant amount of money that we've never had to spend before. Having said that, in my 27 years here, we've never had beaches that look like they do right now either. The hurricanes both pushed a lot of sand inland, and then on the way out, they just scoured a whole bunch of sand out. And as you're all probably aware, there are a number of areas along the coast where you can see ancient mangrove stumps and things at low tide that are visible, which tells you that at one point in time, the mangroves actually existed that far out in the coast, and now we're fighting the battle to try and slow its progression inland. But so that's really the only story here is that essentially that, you know, in order to maintain or refill that beach, the figure that we're getting at the moment is somewhere in the order of $4 million, which is essentially this $455 assessment that you see under the special category of capital. Having said that, you know, this will take place, if we approve this and go ahead, this will take place in October, probably late October, probably we'll be on the back end of the county project. What happens is the county does the bidding and contracting for this amount of sand at a certain, you know, rate per cubic yard, and we essentially piggyback on the back of that to get their pricing, and then they essentially fill our section of the beach after they've done the Vanderbilt. So if they do the Vanderbilt in the October-November timeframe, we're looking at probably November, December for ours. Our consultant basically has told us at the last meeting we were here that it will essentially return the beaches to the status that they were in, you know, prior to Helene and Milton of last year. It doesn't provide for any kind of additional what are we going to call it, you know, resistant type of activities that could be possibly contemplated on top of that, largely because most of them are difficult to conceive that would be practical, and we know that there are extreme difficulties in potentially getting those approved by the various regulatory bodies, even if we could come up with those concepts. That's not to say that we're not going to continue to think about those things, but right now, from a budgeting point of view, they're kind of beyond our capability of either firming up a clear idea of what we might do, let alone putting a price tag on them. So what we're proposing here is essentially to put things back the way they were, okay? Unfortunately, the cost of doing that is significantly more than it has been in prior years. Just to give you a context, in the years when we've done this sort of sand renourishment in the past, it's been on a much more limited scale. We've tended to focus on the areas around Marker 36 and South Beach only, and not spent much in the way of resources replenishing sand in between those markers. And the theory there was that, you know, people obviously use Marker 36 a lot and South Beach a lot. Most of the activity along the beaches in between that are pedestrians walking up and down the beach, usually along the coastline, and so it's not as urgent, if you like, to have pristine beaches all the way along. Having said that, they've never been in the state that they're in right now, right? They've always been okay in between those destinations and those activity centers. This year, they're clearly not. There was a thought at one time to, you know, maybe just leave those the way they are and just, again, concentrate on 36 and South Beach. But the consultant suggests to us, and I think we've heard this before, that if you just do parts of the beach, you know, given wave action and the fact that sand gets moved around a lot, you know, that won't protect those. They'll get washed away very easily if we don't do the whole beach. So the proposal from our consultant is that we need to step up and do this. It doesn't, you know, so we either have the option of, you know, accepting the recommendation essentially and believing that's what we should be doing, or essentially ignoring the recommendation and not doing essentially what the county is doing up and down the coast, north and south of us. So this proposal includes the refurbishing of the beach on the same basis that it's being done up and down the county. The reason it's a bigger issue for us is that the county is able to use their tourist tax dollars to fund their activities to do this. So the level of pain that they endure to refurbish their beaches is very limited, right? In our case, we're responsible for it and we only have a limited budget. So for us, $4 million is a lot of money, and we don't have a tourist tax fund that we can go and draw on to do it. So we have to fund it ourselves, and that's why this number is as large as it is. This is relatively unprecedented in the time that I've been here. I can only think of one other time in the recent history when we've had to ask for a significant capital, funding increase, and that was after Hurricane Irma, when the cleanup and so on from that hurricane was quite disastrous, and we spent, I think, up to $2 million in the cleanup of that. And at that time, we had to, I think it's before my time on the board, but there was a request, there was an assessment made of an approximately, at the time, about a 50% increase on what the assessment was at the time to fund that. I would say that, because some folks have asked, is that some of this money that we have expended this year and some of the money that's in this special assessment will be claimed from FEMA. We don't know exactly how much yet, but a good portion of it will be claimed from FEMA. The problem is that we have to fund it in the short term, right? In some cases in the past, the county has stepped up and allowed us to use them as a bank in this case, and then when the money came back, they took it. They have kind of told us that they don't want to do that anymore. So we're kind of, and particularly this is on the beaches, which they have a lot of sensitivity to private access beaches. They're not interested in being our piggy bank here, so we have to fund this. So we may well get some money back at some future date from FEMA. If FEMA exists in a few years, we'll see. But if it comes back, we'll put it back in the fund and return it to the folks. But right now, we have to fund it if we want to do it. So that's the situation we're in. The only other thing I'd mention here under the special assessment under operations is that there's a $45 assessment there. That essentially is about half of the contingency that we used to carry each year going into each fiscal year. We have a carry forward on our budget this year, which we will use to help fund that, but it doesn't cover it all. So in order for us to put us in a situation where we've got roughly about $1 million sitting in a contingency fund, which we would hold back essentially to cover the types of things we've had to do this year, which is to do the beach dig out, the sand from the back of the beaches and the swale. That's what it's there for. We used it this year. Okay, so every year we've felt that we needed to have that going into the year because we're sitting here in April. We don't know what the situation is going to be at the end of this hurricane season, and we don't know what it's going to be come September 30th of next year. So $1 million in our back pocket to cover those kinds of things has always seemed to be something that we needed to have, and this $45 helps us put that back in place. The other things that we've done, I mean, you'd expect us to do when we get an unusual situation like we had this year. Obviously, the dune swale and the beach activity that we had to do this year well exceeded that $1 million. And what we did, as you'd expect us to do, is we went and drew money from some of our capital projects that we would typically have planned for, just to give us the money to get by doing that. All right. This plan puts some of that money back in place so that we can continue to fund those projects that we think we need to do going forward. That's kind of the overall situation. There is a schedule behind this that goes into some of the projects that we are putting money against. The biggest one on there, as you'll see, of course, is the beach renourishment project. But there are a number of other items in there which I'll just briefly touch on. In the capital budget, we typically have $200,000 to $300,000 for landscaping. This is just general renewal of a 35 to 40-year-old landscaping platform that we have here. The signage project, some of you probably noticed that we have a bit of a mishmash of signage in the community. Some years back after Hurricane Ian, I think it was, we started to replace some of that signage to switch from what was the old Verde green signage to an all black signage. That project has been ongoing for some while. We're still trying to do that. We've kind of taken a little bit of money each year in the budget to go towards that. This year it's $150,000 plus some carry forward from this year. So there'll be about $260,000 available for that project next year. The roadway safety project anticipated doing something probably on crosswalks and other things. That's just money that's been tucked away, ready for that if that were to materialize. Operations building, as you know, is ongoing, is largely funded, but we're looking at possible overruns on a couple of things. We've provided some money for that. The street light project is essentially upgrading the current lighting system to a LED system we're putting in. I think we're about a third of the way through doing that, maybe half the way through doing that. Money set aside for doing that. And then there's a fair amount of money that's set aside in here, you'll see, for pipes, drains, and lakes. All right, and that's really where I've talked about a couple of things. One is that we're starting to find and encounter more and more situations where the old 40-year-old piping is starting to cause us some issues, and so we don't necessarily know where they are at this point, but we're starting to see a lot more of them occur. And so we need money set aside for that activity. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do try and make some provision for remediation of some of the lakes in the neighborhood from time to time. We anticipate the community center lake probably coming up in next year's budget at some point, assuming the foundation move ahead with their project. That's likely to cost in total more than $1 million. If we do it, there's $500,000 set aside here towards that. All of these things are in place to try and make this capital budget increase gradually over time, but give us the capacity to do these projects. The other items in there are the loan principal repayment, which we started to do this year, $500,000 for that, and interest still on the loan at $250,000. Those are the larger items in there. So that's kind of how the capital budget gets put together, but obviously it's swamped this year by the cost of beach renourishment. And although we don't know totally what the exact number of tons of sand and even the cost per cubic yard of that is going to be at this point, our best guess at the moment is somewhere in the order of $4 million, and we've got a little contingency in there in case it's worse than that, because we do feel once we get started on it, we have to complete it. So if it turns out that it's less than that, clearly we'll use that money for other things if we need to, or we will carry that money over into future years and either use it for needs at that point, or we'll use it to reduce the capital needs in the future. But right now we're faced with this one-time, hopefully one-time, but no guarantee, expenditure of around $4 million on the beaches. Obviously, if the hurricanes continue to hit us the way they have, we may need to consider the possibility of an assessment that's more in this $1,500 range than it is in the $1,000 range. So that's the overall kind of high-level situation that we find ourselves in. And the budget committee, went through some of the detail with Chad and the staff the other day, talked about, some of the
estimates, and some of these are clearly estimates, right? Simply because we just have no clear, at this point in time, no clear certainty as to what the exact numbers are going to be. As we do at every year, we don't know. But this year particularly, we have some uncertainty. And this is our best assessment of what we need to do to put things back in place and to continue with our planned capital project agenda that we've had in place now for a number of years. So with that said, let me first of all, not everybody obviously on the board was at the budget meeting, and so let me first open up to the board members for questions on the budget proposal as it's drafted.
So, first of all, I wanted to find out, I wanted to read this paragraph that we talked about the other day, where we noted an overage for the sidewalks, and this was last October, for $485,000. And the way we dealt with that was that we took $285,000 from our beach renourishment project and $200 from our traffic sign renovation. So the reason I ran for the Pelican Bay Services Division Board, first of all, is that I want to talk to you all about what our most important assets are. And it's our beaches, it's our restaurants, and it's our mangroves. We've spent $10 million and took a loan on sidewalks in the last 3 years, but we've had how many hurricanes in the last 5 to 7? And they've ravaged our beaches, they've filled our moat, our mangroves with sand, and now we're asking for an assessment. But we already have a loan out for sidewalks. We have $1 million for lights. We have $500,000 for lakes that we are not 911s in my book, from what I've been listening to. And what we do need is our restaurants to stay intact. And like a moat, our mangroves have been filled with sand. And I've heard all kinds of reports from our engineers that everything's just fine. But what I do know is when I build a sandcastle with my grandchildren at the beach and I do a big moat, the first wave comes and guess what? It fills up that moat and it doesn't attack my castle. But when we don't dig that sand out of that mangrove, then there's no place for that surging water to go except to attack our beachfront. So no matter how much sand we throw in front of it, it's not going to be $1.5 million. It should probably be about $10 million like the sidewalks because the whole coastline has been destroyed by these hurricanes. So I can't claim to know the answers, but when we take money from our beach renourishment for a sidewalk, I think that was a decision. Do I think it was a good one? No. And when we leave $1.2 million on the board for maybe, then we can assess for an emergency our constituents. But when we just leave money sitting in these funds and we're not taking care of the beaches and the mangroves first, I want to know who in this room doesn't think our beaches, our mangroves, and our restaurants are our most important asset that we have our property values on. And did the sidewalks change our property values on any? They're really nice to have. But was that a 911 for us after 30 years? So I'm here because I'm your voice. And I want us to budget logically, heartfelt, and for the best interests of our community. And the PBSD was formed to take care of our beaches, our mangroves, our landscaping, our lakes. We already did a giant renovation of Oakmont Lake. But what we haven't done, and now last night, the water is up to the stairs at the Nest and at the North Beach. So I'm offended by this assessment. I think that we should be honest with our taxpayers and tell them what our priorities should be. And quite frankly, I don't think our priorities are straight on this board. So we're asking for an assessment when the money is sitting on the books. And if there was an emergency, I'm sure we could do an emergency assessment. I believe that's able to be had. So I listened to your long drawn-out explanation, but you didn't cover that we still had money left in the fund for beach renourishment last year, or at the end of this year. Why wasn't it all spent on our beaches? Because they clearly need a lot of work.
Anybody else got any comments? No? Anybody in the audience? Yeah.
Hi, my name's Allison Abbey. I have never spoken at a meeting before, but I was motivated to come here because of our beaches and echo everything Cindy just said about maintaining our beaches, and I think all of us here do. my question goes along with that, and I've asked this question to many people, and I don't know if the answer is correct or not, but the mangroves where all the dead trees are is very, very unattractive. What I've been told is that it's a Florida law that they can't be removed because they'll grow back. That's what I've been told. And I just want to hear that from the authority that that is the case. And if that is the case, how many years do we have to wait until, or can we anticipate to wait until they grow back? Because to walk from South Beach, to Bay Colony, which I do regularly, unfortunately the storm has attacked our beauty. So I was just looking for an answer from that question from the authority.
Okay, thank you.
John Dukin, the Claridge. One of the things that I'm not sure has been incorporated into the budget considerations, and that relates to kind of a law change that Florida's going to make that's going to take effect July 1, and it's going to require the inspection of stormwater facilities within each political subdivision on a cadence, and the first cadence will be June. Not this coming June, but it will be next June because the law's going to go into effect in July. And that cadence is going to specify by stormwater facility what the annual or 2-year or 3-year inspection requirement is based upon what that facility is. One of the facilities in Pelican Bay that I can just see, and having walked properties like Cap Ferrat, the Coronado, the Claridge, between the Claridge and the Montanaro, and I know there's other easements that are moving water from the east under Pelican Bay Boulevard through concrete culverts to the west to head out. Those swales that are in what I believe to be the PBSD easements have not been maintained. I doubt they've been maintained in 30 years. I've walked them, I've seen them. The silt accumulation is extensive. It's going to require quite a bit of work. As part of the requirement of Florida, they are going to require the inspection. They're going to require a report to the state on what the findings have been, and they're going to require remediation. And so I just think that A, it has to be done, I think, because it's a problem, but B, our hands are going to be forced to do those inspections on a cadence, and I think we need to incorporate the anticipated costs of that going forward in this budget.
That funding is in the budget. It falls under the drainage.
The 540? I've good to know. I will tell you, I think that's not enough just based upon, my education in resiliency space and dealing with stormwater in my history. I don't think that's anywhere near enough for what I have personally inspected and what I know. I've seen the maps with the easements that continue down Pelican Bay Boulevard. I haven't walked all these swales and culverts. And then, of course, you've got to look upstream east, right, Chad? You got to look upstream east and say, okay, what do we have to, what problems are there? What are retention ponds looking like? Do they need maintenance? The riprap in a lot of these swales that I'm seeing have completely eroded. There just seems like there's a lot of work to be done there. So I would say, okay, maybe we should take another look, because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I don't think 540 is going to cover it.
You're probably right, but we got to put sand on the beach.
Well, yeah. You're right, we do. We also have to comply with the state, and that's a state requirement. And I will tell you, as an owner in a high-rise building, it's a problem. Now, we haven't been flooded by our lack of maintenance there because there's a little bit greater elevation loss, but it's coming. But the Coronado I've seen, the Cap Ferrat has significant. I walked that today actually with people from that building. There's just a lot of maintenance. So I'd suggest sometimes when we look at these things, we don't want to give the bad news to the membership that, hey, we're going to have to raise our rates. But if there's bad news, we should get it and we should incorporate it into the budget. We should not do it because we don't have the money. We need to take action, and we need to incorporate that and share the bad news with the constituents, because that problem's not going to go away.
Thank you for that. That's good. I wasn't aware of the Florida arrangements. Are you familiar with all that, Chad? No.
Been told that,
We're probably looking at that. I think the history, I can give you the history a little bit while we've been here, is that when we first started 3 or 4 years ago when I was involved, the drainage through the swales and the conduits had proven over years to be more than adequate. In fact, in Ian, it stood up surprisingly well. Even with the amount of flooding we got with Ian, it drained out very quickly, and it seemed to be working quite well. But I think we were starting just as an experiential thing. We're starting to encounter more issues with drainage. And so we've gradually started to, increase the amount of money that we're devoting towards that activity. You raise a whole a monster of a thing of the state getting involved and telling you to do assessments, and we all know what happens when when you start getting into those things. The high-rise buildings have had to do that recently, and they're getting into enormous issues with that. That raises obviously a whole bunch of concerns as to how extensive that's going to be and what they may well mandate. But that's, at the moment, that's sort of sitting here in April. I don't think at this point in time we're able to sort of earmark money into the budget for next year for that, although it's something we'd clearly need to pay attention to and get some more information about. If we've run into problems in the past, what we do in this budget, as I said to you, a lot of it's estimates. You'll see that in there, there's for the lake banks and the pipes, there's a combined 1.2 million. We break it out. It's just based on what we think we're going to have. But if we had to defer a lake bank project to fund an immediate conduit problem, we would do that, right? So we can move this money around some, but we're trying to earmark some monies for things that we think we might have to do, or things that we anticipate having to do in the next year or two. So point well taken. I appreciate you bringing that up. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you. Mike, you got a
Mr. Chairman, may I just respond that there's been an open invitation to all the presidency HOAs and the property managers for our May 8th water management meeting, which is basically going to cover the kinds of issues you're addressing, where we're going to outline where our easements are, what we do, how we inspect, what we maintain, and what we can expect or should expect from the communities and what they should be conscious of. I hope out of that discussion we're able to see our way through a more cooperative exchange of both information and assignment of responsibilities so that the system is maintained and does work when we need it.
Yes, Mike.
Mike Shepard. I'm at Las Brisas. And I was your treasurer after Hurricane Ian when we had the $500 extra increase that Mike referred to, and I can tell you that's a painful process for the treasurer, so I certainly sympathize with your plight right now. But it has occurred to me then, and it occurs to me now, that the amount of our assessment for PBSD is relative to the market value of our homes is almost a rounding error. And we argue and sweat over $100 or $200 or even $500. And in the scheme of things, given the quality of the community and the importance of maintaining the community in top drawer fashion, that the kind of dollars we're talking about are almost inconsequential. Pelican Bay, we just had a fairly major capital project in my neighborhood 2 years ago, and in the researching of the various constraints and parameters of that project, we discovered that Pelican Bay, not Naples, but Pelican Bay is considered one of the 16th most affluent communities in the country. Now, those kind of numbers are variable. They survey based on this population density and whatnot, so those can move around, but the takeaway is that Pelican Bay is one of the most affluent, maybe not the 16th, but one of the most affluent communities in the country. And as a result, to keep it there, we've got to be prepared to spend the money that's necessary. And this group, the Services Division, has done an excellent job over the years identifying the long-term burdens that we face to maintain it to that level, but has always resisted raising the funds that are necessary to accomplish the identified purposes. And I'll give an example of the lakes. Of the 60-some lakes in Pelican Bay, you hold the maintenance permits on 40-some, I think 45. And almost all of those lakes are out of specs right now. And the cost is variable, but averages somewhere in the $1 million plus per lake. Now, just the lakes, that means, that are already out of specs over 40-some years of deferred maintenance would require $40 million. And I don't think you've been able to contribute $40 million to the capital budget since the Reagan administration. So to continue to, agonize and hand-wring over whether you're going to raise the fee from $1,000 to $1,500 or even substantially more is the wrong argument to have. I think the sequence needs to be determine what's necessary to keep this community in a top-drawer fashion, and then simply step up and that amount of money to accomplish your purposes. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. The only other comment I'd make is relative to one of the comments that was made earlier on, is that when we're trying to address the beach issue, and to some degree the mangroves, there's water. We've got water intrusion, water surge, and now we've got sand surge, right? If you go back in time, our exposures were to, in the old days, were damage from wind, basically, from prior hurricanes. Had very little damage from water, and certainly none from sand. So in the last 2 years, we've now got exposure to what some people tell us is once in 100-year, storm surge with Ian, and now we've got something that's unusual, supposedly, with sand. And they're somewhat different issues in the sense that, when Ian came in, we had 13 feet of water came into the place. It flooded, way back onto the golf course, as it was supposed to do, which is part of the water management system, and on into, particularly up into Bay Colony, which we had already identified as a low area of Pelican Bay and at risk. But when that water went back out, things returned, relatively speaking, to normal, interestingly. The dune swale up in the north part of the community actually, survived pretty well and continued to function. And the mangroves basically survived pretty well too. We got a little bit of sand surge with it, but not much. So and the mangroves are essentially, they don't care too much about salt water, right? If they get salt water intrusion and it goes back out, they're fine with that. They're salt tolerant, and they did provide quite a good storm surge barrier. They don't stop the flood, but they somewhat stop the surge. And so that activity there is, can we do anything to, the immediate reaction is, can we do anything to stop the water flooding into the neighborhood? And the answer to that, as we've gone through in the history of this, is that we cannot do anything on our own to do that. It would have to be an up and down the coast project to do that. And some of you remember the Army Corps of Engineers had a project underway some years back to look at all that, came up with some interesting ideas that was rejected by the community. They restarted the project a year or so ago, and the latest we've heard is that that's now all in abeyance because they've run out of money. And unlikely, I would suspect, to get much more money from the current administration either. So that's not, in the short term, maybe even in our lifetimes, that's really not going anywhere. The new item is this sand surge that we got, right? And that did do a lot of damage to what I would call the back beach. All right? It didn't extend right away into the mangrove, but it decimated the back of the beach. And it raises the question: is there something? What can we do about sand surge, if you want to call it that? And I would like us and the Clam Bay Committee and Mohammed, who's here today, I know, to take a look, perhaps a more thorough look at that and see whether there is some way to build something up at the back of the beaches that would mitigate at least that sand surge, right? The water surge, I don't think I'm quite so concerned about. The sand surge is bothersome, right? If it continues, it's going to keep creeping back into the mangroves. So the question is, given all the limitations, is there something we can do there? Can we build that up in some way that would prevent that? And I think particularly with respect to mangroves, I mean, we probably, in the Army Corps of Engineers project, they had, as I remember, like 20-foot dunes built up all the way along the beach, right? And of course, people didn't like the idea of that. It was going to block their view. It was going to, all sorts of problems. But in front of the mangroves, where nobody really is worried about the view, maybe that has some merit. Maybe there is something we could do there that would mitigate future sand surge there and therefore protect the mangroves some. I'm not, capable of figuring out what that is, but I think we should at least spend some resources and some thinking time about what we could do in front of the mangroves to protect them from the sand. So, but I don't think that's something that we can kind of have any vision of in any form that's clear at the moment in terms of putting anything in the budget. And although Mike would like us to do it, I don't think on top of the $4 million we're looking at to replace the beach at the moment that there's any appetite for another $2 or $3 million worth of engineering costs to try and figure out what that might be. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be working on it, okay? So with that said, and if anybody else has any other comments on this, I'm going to ask for a vote to approve the budget as drafted for submission to the county. This will probably come, we'll have another opportunity. Chad will give us an update at the next board meeting as to whether he gets any new information from the county in the meantime, but we anticipate that whatever comes from the county, we can probably accommodate it within this envelope that I'm asking for today, okay? So the motion I'm putting on the table is to approve a total assessment for 25-26 of $1,550 per ERU.
So moved.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate that. Mohammed, you came today, you gave us your time. Is there a comment you'd like to make? Because we do rely on you for advice on all of these matters.
For the record, Mohammed Dabis, project engineer for the PBSD. The main comment I would like to say is, as everyone mentioning the condition of the beach, the condition of the mangrove, and our action plan moving forward, I believe Neil has already provided the update on the permitting plan that we're working to continue to have authorization to manage clam pass. But with respect to the mangrove and the beaches, we have expressed to the PBSD that our first priority is to continue reclaiming the sand overwash that is extended into the mangrove, remove that sand to restore the dune that used to exist before Ian, and have some of the material that we will dredge from the clam pass to address the south portion of that stretch. And then when the county does the truck haul next year, we will supplement whatever volume we need to restore that stretch of beach between Marker 36 and South Beach. In that order, and I think it's very critical that we move to allocate the contractor that needs to recover the sand overwash, allow some of that mangroves to recover, which is something that we're not the only one that is facing this. All the communities along our coast from Collier all the way to Pinellas had the same problem with sand overwash. My other comment is the conditions that we've seen since 2022 of having high surge storms in Ian, Idalia, Debbie, Helene, and Milton, 5 storms in the span of 2 years is really unprecedented. And I don't want to go as far as saying it's unpredictable, because we are in a tropical season, we are in a tropical zone, and we expect to see storms here and then. We used to expect an average storm once every 5 years and a major storm every 10 years. We have at least 2 major storms affect our areas within 2 or 3 years, which it's the luck of the draw. The East Coast didn't have those storms in the past 10 years, but we did. So judging by the history of where I've been here for 25 years, is that we have active seasons in 04, 05, and then 17 with Irma. So if there is any hope, is that the rule of statistics is that we're not going to be always the front line of these storms, but if it happens, then we have to be prepared to take remedial action. If it doesn't, it would be the chance to improve our resiliency. To improve our resiliency, as I said, we need to reestablish the dunes. Our problems this year with Helene and Milton is that the dune was flattened by Ian. And then any storm that comes after that, it's an open season. The sand doesn't have anything to control it. So we need to be able to reestablish our dunes. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, that we need to prioritize reestablishing the dune before we do vegetation on the backside of the dune.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd say is that when you say reestablish the dune the way it was, you're kind of talking in the order of 4 or 5 feet, right? I'm wondering whether it's not something that couldn't be significantly more than that. But not to answer today, but if we could keep that as some idea of a possibility to look at in the future.
I would hope that we can establish a dune that can go up to +7, which is a decent size dune, because if we go any higher, bringing the sand is quite a substantial cost. We need to start with the sand that we can reclaim, supplement with what we can get from the Clam Pass when we already modified our permits to allow us to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just saying that if you take off the limitation for the moment of how much it costs, what is possible is all I'm saying. And so you don't have to answer it today, but working with the Clam Bay Committee, if you could at least keep that on the table. The other thing I'd ask is, one of the problems we have is, as I understand it, is the type of sand that's being put on the beach is not ideal from a stability point of view, right? It's very light, it blows around, can get easily moved by the tides, blah, 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 blah. But I understand it's prescribed by state regulation, right?
And availability. These are the sand sources that are approved for beach compatibility. It's just the fact that it is sand that is saved and graded and doesn't have any shells and is not coming from the marine environment. It takes time for it to settle and rain, and we didn't have those chances because they placed the sand, then when we get storm, it's the same thing with the vegetation. You need it to weather with the climate, you need it to be sorted by nature versus placed in one spot.
Yeah. A question is that given the fact that, we're only a small piece of what's being placed on the beach up and down here, is there any chance of getting together with these other folks that have got a bigger problem we have to see whether we could change that rule to,
I think the process, the way the process works is the applicant finds a sand source and then gets it approved from the agencies. So when you look at the truck haul, there are specific mines that have been approved or pre-approved, and that's basically the upland sand that is available in Florida. So finding a different source is easier said than done.
Well, I just wanted to ask a few questions. So I've been here for many years now talking about dredging Clam Bay, you know that. And I see the sand building up, and it came from the Gulf. But I keep hearing we can't take the dredging out of the sand, out of the mangroves. But now I'm hearing you're saying you can, which I'm pretty excited if that is the case, because that is the natural sand.
Yes.
That is the sand that would be firmer, harder than the soft sand that we bring in. I've asked for questions, do we have studies of what soft sand does and why it washes away? Well, I mean, just common sense, just looking at what we are doing here speaks volumes that we need to get that sand out of the mangroves. And I think almost everybody here agrees that we don't have the water flow in our ditches anymore. That means we don't have the wildlife, we don't have the spoonbills, we don't have the turtles, we don't have the sea otters. There's no water going through those ditches in the South Beach. That dune that I call a dune is the dune that has been allowed to form by that bridge at South Beach where no water flows there anymore. And I know you've heard me speak volumes about this, but I'm not hearing the answers that we can get that out of there. And I'm thinking we can.
We can, and I think this...
And that's what I just want to hear for once in many, many years of hurricanes, is that we're going to use the sand that we have.
Throughout Collier County and all of Southwest Florida counties, the emergency final order that was issued post the storms allows communities to reclaim the sand that was overwashed by the storms. The technicalities of it is just the access and how you can put equipment and how you can reach the sand. And sometimes when there are a lot of live trees that prohibit that access, there will be more of a tendency of let nature take its course. But in my technical view of this is the system, because of the 3 major hurricanes that hit our system, we have about 100-foot retreat of that dune line. And if we have an opportunity with the current emergency final order that allow us to reclaim that, we need to reset the dune to where it was and not allow the future storms to retreat us another 100 feet. So by reclaiming that sand and by realigning the grades to allow natural mangroves to reseed in that area, which it will, that would be our recommendation.
And to the gentleman's point who was speaking about spending whatever we can to restore our beaches, I think we are all of the feeling that the utmost important in our budget is our beaches. Because if we don't have our beaches and our restaurants, we have nothing here. We will not be any different than any other community in Southwest Florida.
You are very different in the sense that you are more ahead of everyone, in the sense that your zoning or your planning, including 2,000 feet width of a natural ecosystem, yes, before you have your building. If you look north of you at Vanderbilt or south at Park Shore, they're right at the edge of the beach. So you have what would be a dream for any coastal community is to have a berm or a beach, then a dune, then mangrove shoreline, then lagoons or bays, then another mangrove field, and that all act as your multi-tier coastal protection. And our role as the community is, when we get impacted by a storm, is to try to reset it and not just allow it to keep rolling until we lose.
But we haven't been resetting it, is my point. We have been saying no, we can't draft it.
Okay, let's
No, but I just want to find out what we can do as a foundation versus the county. And somebody was talking about we would spend whatever we want, and this assessment is county-based. What I was speaking of is what can we do foundation-based, because you keep saying we have private property and that's our responsibility. So why can't we renourish that with our reclaimed sand at the foundation level, and you county do it as well, and we build it up doubly so we make it more incredible than ever before? What can we do jointly? That's what I've been asking questions to.
I think we can, I don't think the foundation actually reclaims any sand, but you know, clearly we've identified in recent years that we can take this sand out of, some of the sand at least, out of Clam Bay, that there are problems if you overdredge Clam Bay, as I understand it, too.
Yes.
But if we take whatever sand is appropriate out of Clam Bay, we've now gotten an extension on the permit right that allows us to place that north of this pass,
all the way to Marker 36,
which we didn't have before, right? Yes. And so we did some of that last year, and you're proposing that we do that this year, I believe. So we are doing some of that, but there's, as I understand it, there's no way in heck that you can get enough sand out of there to take it all the way up to Vanderbilt. So to my other point is that that's part of it. I just, you know, I know Mike and the Clam Bay Committee going to look at this, but whatever we can do to reestablish that back dune, what I call the back dune, which to the lady's point earlier on, right now it's trashed, it's trees, that are over and all that, and that, you probably don't want to take them out because that just makes the beach even more unstable if you take the roots out, right? So there's all sorts of issues here, which I don't want to get into, but if you can take a look at that back beach area.
Yes, there are more tools available to us post-storm that was not available under typical conditions. So the emergency final order that was issued to deal with the hurricanes allow us to claim the sand that was just intruded into our mangrove fields, remove the dying or the dead trees, and reset the conditions for some of those mangroves to reestablish. But all this starts with I think the contract that the PBSD is working on with Collier County to get that portion of the beach done.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
When was that emergency declaration you were talking about? When was that made?
With every named storm, there is usually an emergency declaration from the state, and that allows certain activities to be done with expedited permitting or without the need for permitting, including the recovery of overwashed sand. And we have emergency final orders for this year or last year for Helene and Milton that are still active. They're typically issued for a certain amount of months, but they keep renewing them to the extent that the emergency final order from Hurricane Ian is still active.
And Mohammed, just to refresh my memory a little bit about after Irma, post Irma, we did reclaim the sand from the mangrove, correct?
After Irma, I think all we did is we dredged the pass.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is a difference between the sand within an authorized permit, because every typical activity you have to have authorized permit for the cut and fill. But for post-storm, if you have sand that overwashed and covered your streets, like what happened in many parts of Naples, you have the emergency final order allows you to take that sand and clean it and put it back on the beach versus applying for a permit to do those activities.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move. Sorry, Mike.
I just need to clarify because the more I listen, the more confused I get. At our March meeting here, the board approved four recommendations from the Clam Pass Water Management Committee, each of which was based on your recommendations, basically. And just to refresh ourselves, we are authorized to proceed with the Clam Pass dredging.
Yep.
That's your recommendation, and that's what we're doing. We recommended and the board approved the project for the beach reestablishment, essentially, of the template and piggybacking on the county, and that was your recommendation. That's what we're doing. We approved the recommendation to take the additional sand from the backside and use it for beach restoration and dune building.
Yep.
And that was your recommendation, and the board approved that.
Yes.
And we recommended and the board approved the planting over the rainy season of additional coastal grasses and things to stabilize what we were doing. So what I'm confused is, are you saying anything today different than what was recommended and recommended to the board?
To reclaim that sand before you do the vegetation.
So it's a sequencing issue for you?
Yes. Okay. It just makes sure that you don't plant on the sand that we need to reclaim.
That would make a lot of sense.
Exactly. So it's a matter of timing, and don't do these things so distinct that if we're waiting for a contract to be approved, there is another contractor planting on top of the sand that we are waiting for the contract to dredge.
I don't think we're going to do that.
Okay.
But I just want to be clear, there's nothing you said today among your recommendations is different than what was recommended to the board and what was approved by the board.
It's the sequencing, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for coming. I appreciate that. Obviously, ongoing discussions in the Clam Bay Committee on all of these issues, as is always the case. And also on the Water Management Committee with all of the drainage issues that we now seem to be encountering more frequently. So all of those things to be done in the next year, which leaves us to Chairman's report. I don't really have much at the moment. Typically, we go through committee assignments after the chairman has been appointed and so on. So I will, I'll sit down, I know, and talk with staff on that. I know board members have already been polled as to which committees they would like to participate in. Typically, as this is a volunteer board, you know, whatever committee members wish to participate in is usually granted, so I don't anticipate that changing. And then I have to scratch my head a little bit about some of the who's going to run which committee. We are, I think it's agreed, it's been recommended, and I've agreed. I agree with it that we'll split back the Clam Bay and the Water Management Committee just because there seem to be so many more issues arising and it requires a little bit more attention than I think one person can give to it. So we will be splitting those committees up. They may well meet on the same day for administrative purposes, but they will be at least pursuing a slightly different agenda. So I will, I'll talk to staff, and that I'll send that out through staff notice in the next week or so. I don't really have anything else at this point. Does anybody else want to raise any other issue before we close the meeting?
Mr. Cullen?
It's been a long meeting. I appreciate you hanging in there, and I appreciate the support for the budget recommendation. So thanks, everybody. Meeting adjourned.